demonstrations. You know, I was working with Phil Spector on the record. I had to sing along to the songs so he could understand what they were about, because we were going to co-produce. It just so happened that the engineer placed a microphone there. Recently, someone asked me if I liked 5 people more than anyone else. I laughed a little since I hadn't anticipated such a question. It's actually quite humorous. I'm frequently asked about the Beatles' meditation, guitars, and what I would change if I could. No one ever inquires about love. Not in this manner. I sat there for a while, not because I didn't know the solution, but rather because I was aware that it wouldn't be simple. You see, you meet thousands of people when you've lived a life like mine. While some stay for years, others only stay for an afternoon. Somehow, they become a part of your identity. I've been quite fortunate, whether you realized it at the time or not. I've been surrounded by amazing individuals my entire life. Some became family, some were teachers, some were musicians, and some made me laugh more than anybody could. Others subtly altered my perspective on the world without my knowledge. The odd thing is that recordings and concerts don't instantly come to mind when I remember back. I recall sipping tea while seated in someone's kitchen. I recall conversing while driving for no specific reason. One conversation led to another, and I recall staying up much too late. Those are the times that seem to go on forever. People believe that being a member of the Beatles was one incredible adventure after another. A portion of it was. However, most people didn't live their lives on stages. It took place around dinner tables, in homes, in gardens, in studios, or during lengthy talks when no cameras were present. You truly get to know people there. Friendships are put to the test there. And that's where love, in all its manifestations, quietly blossoms. Because they were well known, the 5 individuals I will discuss are not present. I can't tell the tale of my life without them, which is why they are here. Every one of them left me something that I never truly returned. The first one, I suppose most people are already familiar with that. John Lennon. John had the ability to make you laugh before you even realized he was making a joke. He had that sharp wit from Liverpool. He would have moved on to the next thing if you hadn't kept up with him. None of us were considering switching to a different genre of music when we initially met. We were merely young boys with a passion for records. That was sufficient. We would listen to American rock and roll for hours on end, attempting to figure out how they achieved that sound. After that, we would pick up our guitars and give it a shot. It was effective at times. It frequently didn't. However, we relished every second of it. I respected John's self-assurance, not because he believed he was superior to everyone else. He just didn't hesitate to attempt new things. He would change a song's lyrics if he thought they were necessary. He would inform you if he thought anything was garbage. With John, you were always aware of your position. Sometimes it could be hard, to be honest. We used to fight over the tiniest things on certain days. One of us would never let go of a chord, a phrase, or an idea. In retrospect, none of those disagreements were particularly significant. They were only one of 4 young musicians attempting to produce their best work. It was the laughing, not the arguments, that stuck with me. John chuckled a lot. Sometimes people forget that. They recall the comments or the interviews, but they forget how hilarious he was in the absence of an audience. When it was just the 2 of us, or the 4 of us sitting around after a session talking about nothing at all, those were some of the hardest laughs I've ever experienced. I wish folks could have seen those recollections. We all changed as the years went by. How could we not? We didn't really have time to comprehend achievement because it came so fast. We got married. A few of us went on to become fathers. Our interests, snorts, started to diverge. That didn't take away all we had discussed. It merely meant that life was progressing. People have long enjoyed speculating about a dramatic conclusion involving all of us. That wasn't exactly how real life was. Relationships evolve. Humans require room. You may talk every day at times. Weeks may pass before you pick up the phone once more. The friendship does not end as a result. It simply develops into something new. Beatlemania was never the first thing that came to me when I thought about John. Well, I remembered the young man from Liverpool who shared my passion for music, the person who, by saying something wholly unexpected, may turn an ordinary afternoon into something truly memorable. I'm glad I knew that John, the genuine one, not the one the media reported on. I'll always have that with me, I guess. The next individual has been in my life for nearly the same amount of time. McCartney, Paul. Paul and I have such a long history together that it almost seems like we've known each other since before the records, the TV appearances, and even before anyone outside of Liverpool knew who we were. All we were doing was pursuing music. We were actually bonded by that. John and Paul are frequently referred to as the greatest songwriting duo, and they undoubtedly were. However, it's commonly forgotten that we all encouraged one another to improve as musicians. You couldn't afford to remain motionless. If Paul had a great idea, it inspired you to come up with something equally excellent the following day. You didn't want to disappoint the others, not because it was a competition. Paul has always had a remarkable sense of music. He'll hear something once, and before you realize it, he's already expanding on it. That's something I've always admired. Sometimes, long after I had begun to consider a cup of tea, he would still be working on an arrangement in the studio. He is simply that way. He truly enjoys creating songs. That hasn't, I believe, ever left him. Naturally, individuals prefer to concentrate on the challenging times. It makes sense. Four musicians getting along flawlessly is not as interesting as those stories. Were there arguments? Of course. We would occasionally tug in different ways. At times, each of us would think that our own concept was the best one. That's inevitable when you spend almost every day together. None of us, in my opinion, were always really simple, myself included. The fact that respect doesn't just vanish after a disagreement is something that people seldom ever bring up. Paul's talent has always been respected by me. Never once. I always recognized that I was working with someone who had a remarkable skill, even if we occasionally had different perspectives. Paul's positivism is something I've always valued. He would be enthusiastic about the next song, the next session, the next opportunity, even when everyone else was exhausted. It was contagious, sometimes draining, but contagious nonetheless. The stories people still write about, or the business meetings, are not the first recollections that come to mind when I reflect on the past. I recall sitting with our guitars, experimenting with harmonies, giggling when someone mispronounced a word, and looking at one another after a take and realizing that we had caught something unique without having to express it. We own those times. The completed records were heard by the entire world. We had the good fortune to see them come to life. I am appreciative of that. And I'm thankful that there were only 4 young boys who liked music and enjoyed creating it together before things got so difficult. I will always remember that version of Paul. I didn't meet the next individual until much later. However, he altered its course in ways I never would have thought possible. Shankar Ravi. The sitar is typically what comes to mind when people hear Ravi Shankar's name. That makes sense. He was an exceptional musician. However, someone has overlooked the most significant aspect of him if that is all they can recall about him. I was searching for another instrument, so I didn't get to meet Ravi. I was searching for something I couldn't quite put into words when I met him. Life had become a little weird by the mid-1960s. There were people every place we went. Every choice appeared to be someone else's. The front door was unfeasible, so you would exit a motel through the kitchen. When you sat down to supper, you would wonder if everyone in the room truly knew you, or just had a notion of you. Living this way can be lonely. I then got to know Ravi. His music wasn't the first thing that caught my attention. It was how at ease he appeared to be with himself. He had no intention of impressing anyone. Who was famous didn't matter to him. He didn't talk as if he knew everything. He just lived how he thought others should. That was refreshing to me. Music wasn't actually the topic of our initial discussions. They discussed life, patience, paying attention, and slowing down enough to hear your own ideas. I think learning the sitar was easier for me than that. I had been running around the studio, airport, hotel, concert, and back for years. Ravi reminded me in a subtle way that not everything significant had to happen right away. That stuck with me. He is sometimes credited with introducing me to Indian music. Yes, he did. However, he also gave me an other perspective on the world. Rather than promoting certainty, he promoted curiosity. He never attempted to impose his views on others. He would respond to whatever questions I posed. He would just leave things there and let me figure things out on my own if I wasn't ready to understand them. That was really regarded by me. He eventually ceased to feel like a teacher. I actually looked forward to meeting him, and we became close friends. Every time we spent time together, I felt more at ease when I left. Giving that to someone else is quite a gift. I'm not sure if Ravi ever understood the extent to which he transformed my life. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. In any case, I'm appreciative. I believe I would still be writing songs without him. I don't think I would have known myself quite as well, but I would still have played the guitar. He assisted me in realizing that serenity and success don't always coexist. I think that's the best lesson I've ever learned. People frequently find the next person shocking, primarily because they believe they already know our narrative. In actuality, they are only partially aware of it. Clapton. Eric. I doubt that Eric and I should have become such close friends. Well, that's what most people believe. You would think there was no possibility that we would ever sit in the same room and enjoy each other's company if all you knew about us came from media headlines. Generally speaking, real life is a little more complicated than that. Eric was a musician when I first got to know him. He had a touch that was all his own. And the first time I really listened to his playing, I remember thinking, "Good Lord, this fellow can really play." He never seemed to want to flaunt himself. Each note had a purpose. He played with emotion. It was audible to you. Playing quickly is not nearly as difficult as that. Eric's honesty with himself, as well as with others, was one of his qualities that I found most admirable. He never pretended that life was simpler than it really was. Before he ever talked about it, you could frequently hear it in his music if he was having difficulties. That was something I respected. We didn't become buddies because everything went as planned. The exact opposite. It endured because, in the end, we discovered something far more valuable than correctness. We acquired the ability to forgive. I've been asked about Paddy numerous times. I can see why. It is not the entire tale, but it is a portion of it. One difficult chapter doesn't mean the end of life. None of us would ever advance if it did. You have to choose what matters more at some point. Clinging to people who truly matter, or clinging to past pain. As I grew older, the solution became more apparent to me. Eric was more than just another well-known guitarist. I liked spending time with him, and I trusted him. I have some of my best recollections of him off stage. They were the peaceful afternoons. Just music, no audience, no cameras, 2 guitars, and a couple cups of tea. People are typically at their most honest around that time. They cease to perform. They just become who they are. In those situations, Eric was always at his best. He would play something lovely, pause midway through, chuckle because he had made a mistake, and then resume as if nothing had happened. That pleased me. The room was devoid of ego. It was just 2 pals doing what they had enjoyed since they were young lads. In retrospect, I believe that's the reason our friendship endured. Success wasn't the foundation of it. Success fluctuates. Nor was it based on headlines. They vanish much more quickly. It was founded on respect for one another, an awareness that everyone makes errors, and the realization that life is far too short to spend it carrying grudges from the past into the present. I'm delighted we made it there because I would have been devastated to lose a friendship as precious as his. The final individual I will discuss is not someone I got to know via music. She turned into the peaceful focal point of my existence. Olivia. I had already gone through more than I had anticipated by the time Olivia entered my life. The thrill, the insanity, the journey, the achievement. It's a common misconception that you're fully content once you've got all of those things. That isn't how it actually operates. You start searching for something much easier. You can be yourself somewhere. Olivia gave me that. She treated me like George right from the start. It's not the bug. The folks in the street did not halt. Only George. How refreshing that was is beyond words. Pretending was never necessary while she was around. She was quite content if I wanted to spend the afternoon in the garden. It was plenty if I wanted to read or play the guitar in silence. We didn't feel the urge to talk throughout every quiet moment. That's one of the best indicators of a healthy relationship, in my opinion. You're most likely with the appropriate person when you feel at ease in silence. When people look at pictures, they assume they know what a person's home life was like. Usually, the truth is far more subdued. There are some of my best recollections that have nothing to do with recording sessions or gigs. They have a connection to everyday life. Talking about our son, strolling across Friar Park, eating breakfast together, and observing the garden's changing seasons. Unbeknownst to you at the time, those small moments end up being far more significant. Then, a few years ago, neither of us could have predicted how our lives would change. A dude broke into our house, I guess. Although I don't like discussing it, I will add that Olivia's bravery was evident to me that evening. Courage is frequently thought of as something dramatic. I don't. Sometimes all it takes to be courageous is to keep going after the people you care about. She didn't hesitate to defend our family. I will always remember that. Not while I'm still alive. When something like that occurs, your perspective on life starts to shift. You cease worrying excessively about unimportant things. You grow more appreciative of everyday mornings, conversations, and peaceful walks. Things like that become valuable. Over the years, Olivia has given me a lot of gifts. Pianos, empathy, compassion, but maybe the best one has just been tranquility. The kind of item I had been looking for in various locations for a large portion of my childhood. Oddly enough, I discovered it at home. These are the names that immediately spring to mind when people ask me to list the 5 persons I have loved the most. Eric Clapton, Olivia, Ravi Shankar, John Lennon, and Paul McCartney. I received something very different from each of them. John told me to never stop being curious. Paul showed me what it meant to develop via music with a companion. I was able to slow down and gain a new perspective on the world because, to Ravi, snorts. Eric taught me that forgiveness is more powerful than pride.